Hey, good morning and welcome back. Thank you for joining us on Taylor Time Live. I'm your host, Seth Gladden, and today we're going to be continuing our series on the biggest challenges facing the flooring industry. We've got an exciting topic for you. Today is acclimation, why and how. And so we'll be discussing that. And I'm joined actually live in studio today by Gary Scheidker. He's our Director of Tech Services here at Taylor, and you'll meet him in just a minute. But I would encourage you, if you have not checked out the rest of our series this year, we've been covering the biggest challenges facing the flooring industry. We've covered a lot of topics. You can go back to our YouTube channel and check those out. If you go to our website, tayloradhesives.com, just click on the top left. You'll see the YouTube icon. Click on that, and you can go. You'll see tips, playlists, but we have a live playlist, and you can go and see that, and we will have all of these events hosted, and you can go back and watch any of those that capture your interest. So go check those out, and I want to remind you during today's show, if you have any questions pertaining to acclimation, best practices, we encourage you to text those into us. We will be monitoring that and answering those live as we go, and that number's at the bottom of your screen right now. So feel free to text us, join in the conversation, and we hope today is valuable to you and that you'll learn something. Before we jump into acclimation, though, we have our Media Minute segment, and today I'm joined by Margot Locust, who is with, she's the publisher of Premier Flooring Retailer and Fabulous Floors magazines. So, Margot, we're excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So let me just give you a little background.
Yeah.
I've been in the flooring industry for this is my 40th year. I
Okay.
started out doing marketing and advertising for one of our industry icons who's passed away, Sana Calandrino, and her sister Elizabeth. I worked in their retail stores in upstate New York for many years, 23 years, 27 years.
Okay.
And Sana and and Elizabeth started Fabulous Floors magazine in 2003, and I now own it and publish it. And in 2015, I began working with the WFCA with their publication Premier Flooring Retailer. Premier Flooring Retailer is actually retailer focused, and we provide solutions to flooring retailers. I'm also a flooring retailer in
I see that. Yeah.
Western North Carolina. My husband is an enrolled member of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians, so we are a minority-owned retail flooring business.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's
and I see
where
a
a lot
retail
of
shop in the background there, and
yes,
thank you for putting that sign up saying we're in a podcast. Please,
yes,
you said please come in and have a seat quietly, right?
yes. That's what I
So,
said. I'm sitting at
yeah.
my desk right now.
Okay. Well, hey, we appreciate your time. It's great to have you here. First, I'd like to ask you, as we're headed into this recession, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing flooring retailers?
Well, I can really speak for myself, and one of the biggest challenges I'm seeing in my market are the ever-changing product pricing, delivery charges, and logistics as far as delivery times. And
Okay.
what I do is I every week I check in with my suppliers. We talk about inventory. We talk about what's on back order. And the reason I do this is to make sure that my customers don't have to wait weeks for their flooring. It's a huge reason why customers go somewhere else because they don't want to wait.
Right.
And as far as pricing, um, customers are willing to pay more for flooring when they're ready to make their purchase. I see that they're basing it upon aesthetics, performance, and and believe it or not, if they have to wait for it and how long they have to wait for
Yeah.
it.
Sure.
The other problem that I see is uh, the delivery charges are all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, you know, most freight trucks that come in here, and they're mostly um, you know less than load freight trucks, are at least $100.
Wow.
And plus they're adding fuel surcharges, and some manufacturers are actually adding 10 to 15 cents a square foot on top of that. So I find
Wow.
myself having to be constantly mindful of each supplier's change in cost of goods as well as delivery charges.
Sure.
It's really challenging.
Yeah, well, and that's a lot to keep up with when each one of them handles it differently, like you said. So you're juggling,
Exactly.
you're juggling a lot of information and trying to best serve your customers. So,
Well,
um,
I found that it's, I basically have formed relationships with each one of my sales reps and the manufacturers because I need to know this. I need to know this on a weekly basis when a
yeah,
customer comes in. So it's um it's for me it's always been about forming good relationships, and this is part of the relationship that we have.
yeah. Well, and we talk, excuse me, we talk about that a lot on this show is the value of relationships, and so you
Hmm.
nailed it again. That that's the problem, regardless what it is. Oftentimes, the relationship and communication is going to be your answer to it. So, as we look at media specifically in the industry, have you started to see a shift in the way that industry or trade media is approaching the market?
I do, and as a publisher myself, I know that I've shifted more and more to educating both retailers and consumers on the technology in the flooring products, design capabilities, performance, maintenance, um, product differentiation. One of the problems that I see is, especially in the luxury vinyl category, is with so many products in the marketplace, and now we've got manufacturers who were tile only manufacturers or wood only manufacturers. They're getting some skin in the luxury vinyl game, so it's challenging to explain to the customer sometimes what the differences are when you've got 25 12 mil products
Yeah,
and 25 20 mil products,
yeah,
and you know different, and the locking systems and the attach pad and the
yeah,
all the features and benefits. So I'm seeing more and more of my fellow publishers in the trades focusing more on educating retailers on products, including the features and benefits and installation more than ever now. It's it's
yeah,
it's about educating the retailers so they can educate the consumer.
yeah. Well, and that's actually a really cool shift, and I'm glad you mentioned that you're seeing that a lot, not just with your magazines, but also in the industry as a whole, because we feel the same way. Education is extremely important, and if
Hmm.
no one's talking about it, how do people learn how to use the right products, how to choose the right products, which product is right for the job? And so we're big on that. That's actually why we're sitting here now. So I
And
love hearing that.
I also find that as much as we think the consumer understands the flooring categories, they really don't.
Sure. Yeah.
They really don't. I still have customers that walk in and they want laminate flooring, but what they really mean is they want luxury vinyl,
Right.
you know, or they're still referring to engineered hardwood as laminate. They
Yeah.
really don't understand the categories, so you have to dig down and find out where are you putting it, what is your lifestyle like, do you have pets, do you have kids, do you have, you
Yeah.
know, so it's a constant education.
Yeah. Well, and that takes a lot more time and intentionality than just taking an order, but it sure is the
Yes,
right way to go to treat your customer well. So I appreciate that.
absolutely.
Well, Margot, before I let you go, is there anything big happening in the world of flooring that you want our viewers to be aware of?
Well, I think that right now we're gearing up for the winter markets, Tice and some of the other ones that take place in January, February, March. Um, it's really important for me, even when I was as just a retailer, not wearing the publisher's hat, to attend these winter markets because there are so many new products out there, innovations, technology being added to existing products. Attending these markets is really important for me and for retailers because you get
Yeah.
to explore, new flooring and wall options, additional profit centers. Perhaps it's installation tools, adhesives, floor leveling products, cleaning products, decorative grates, trims. I mean, radiant heat. There are so many opportunities to add to your product mix.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, my two biggest competitors are Home Depot and a Lowe's. So
Yeah.
why am I going to give that business to the big box stores when I could provide that service and
Sure.
those products to my customers. So
Sure.
um,
So
yeah,
bottom line, things are changing. Education is becoming more important. Go see the trade shows, go to the winter markets, go to ties, see the new products.
Yeah, do the regional markets.
Yep.
There's so many things that we can gain as retailers from these markets, that even areas that we don't even think about.
Yeah. Well, Margot, I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. And now you can go take care of your customers. We appreciate you. We appreciate you
All right,
taking the
thank
time
you
out of
very
your day
much.
for us. Thank you.
Okay. All right, bye-bye.
So now we're gonna shift to our main topic of the day, which is acclimation, and we titled it "Why and How." And so today I'm joined by Gary Scheidker. As I said, he's our director of technical services here at Taylor Adhesives. And Gary, it's great to have you in studio. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here, Seth. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Gary, acclimation's a big word. It's also a big topic, right? So
Exactly.
as we look at that, first, can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience in the industry and kind of what you've seen over the years with acclimation? That's a big question, so keep it short.
Yeah, well, I've been in the flooring industry since 1970. Grew up in it, worked for my father in the flooring store. Eventually owned stores myself. I've been in the wholesale realm since probably 96. And in that, I've ran into a lot more issues where the flooring retailers really didn't understand acclimation. And it's not critical if you're doing, carpet. Carpet is very forgiving. But if you're doing resilient flooring, especially LVTs and LVPs, hardwood, those type of products, you want to acclimate your floor covering per the flooring manufacturer's instructions. And every one of these products can have different acclimation periods and different needs, whether it's for temperature or humidity and things like that.
Right. So Gary, in your time that you've been in the industry, and you've spent a lot of that time both installing and training installation, you've done sales as well and dealt with customers, and you've kind of seen a lot.
Yes.
Have you seen a shift? Like, did acclimation used to be as big of a problem as it is today, or is it less of a problem today than it used to be? What's your read on that?
It's become more of a problem, especially with fast track installations. When you get into new construction, whether it's single family homes or if it is going into multifamily homes, basically the builders aren't giving the flooring contractors the opportunity to acclimate them. In many cases, the buildings are not under HVAC control when they're wanting the floor installed. And that's not just a big no-no, it's just plain wrong, because you're going to have problems that are going to occur from that, because the laws of physics are still going to apply to that floor covering, whether it's new construction or an owner-occupied space.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. It's hard to get around. Things are going to happen, right?
Yes.
Wood's going to react in one way, and vinyl's going to react, and it's the way it is. So
Exactly.
we are the ones that can make decisions about how to affect that the correct way. So Gary, I know internally, because obviously flooring manufacturers have their acclimation instructions, right?
Yes.
But we also, as an adhesive manufacturer, we have our own as well.
Exactly.
And it's super important, and I feel like a lot of people maybe don't connect the dots that there's more than one thing that has to be acclimated. So can you talk about the system approach of acclimation? Like, what all needs to be acclimated, and why is each part of that important?
Okay. Well, you're going to want to acclimate your floor covering, obviously, whether it's an LVT, LVP, VCT, hardwood floor, whether it's solid or engineered, you still have to acclimate those products. We always recommend bringing in your adhesive at the same time and acclimating it during that same period. 48 hours is generally a minimum, but when you get into certain products, they can actually have extended periods of time. I've actually saw one bamboo product that required a 28-day acclimation period.
Wow.
So you have a product that's extremely moisture reactive. And the unfortunate thing is when you acclimate it, you actually have to acclimate it to the service temperature that building's going to be maintained at. So if you bring it in and it's, say, 60% relative humidity and 50 degrees, well, unless that's the way the people are going to live in that property, that's not your service temperature. You're going to actually have to have it usually between 35 and 50% relative humidity, and generally at room temperature would be between 70 and 75 degrees, depending on where you're at. When you acclimate that flooring, you want to actually acclimate it to the room that it's going to be installed in. Because you could go into a larger home and set up a hygrometer in different ends of that building, and you could have a 2-degree variance, and you can have a variance in your humidity. So it's not just you're not just acclimating for the temperature, you're also acclimating for humidity.
For use, yeah. So, and I know internally we've been taking a look at all of our language because I think historically we've even referred to acclimation as a certain, like a range of temperature and a range of humidity.
Yeah.
And I know we've been working actually recently on changing that verbiage here at Taylor to say service temperature, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because how is that floor going to be used? You know, if it's a walk-in freezer, you know,
Yeah.
a temperature range of whatever we usually say, you know, 50 to
It doesn't apply.
to 85 or whatever has no bearing. So, so it's important to pay attention to that. Are you seeing flooring manufacturers starting to use that same service temperature language?
Yeah, more and more of them are actually starting to adopt that. And then, there's other things you have to consider too. It's not just the ambient temperature, it's also the substrate temperature. So if you're working over a heated substrate like radiant heat, then you also you want to have that slab or that radiant substrate at a room temperature at the time of installation. And then you're going to want to raise that temperature in 5-degree increments because you don't want to shock that floor covering.
Right.
And that's particularly important for resilient products. We run into complaints all the time with LVT and LVP where the floor is gapping or it's actually starting to compress and you get these little peak points at the end joints. And usually what happens is we find out that the floor wasn't acclimated. The building wasn't under HVAC control. And for instance, if you install in the middle of summer and it's hot and it's humid and you put that floor in, once you bring it down to service temperature, that resilient floor is going to shrink. You're going to end up with gaps at your joints, especially on the butt joints, and that becomes an issue. If you install, pardon me, if you install during a period where it's cold and you bring the flooring in when it's cold, as it warms up, it's going to expand and then you're going to end up with problems. And the funny thing is it doesn't happen immediately. It may take several days or even weeks for it to show up because you're going to have the restriction of the adhesive holding it in place also. So it's going to be more difficult to acclimate it after the fact. And you're never going to actually correct the problems. And hardwood in particular, hardwood is going to be susceptible to temperature changes and humidity fluctuations also.
So do you feel like, you just mentioned it, and I'm glad you did, the substrate, right? I feel like a lot of times that gets overlooked in the acclimation equation. And so you've kind of got that 3-tiered approach of you got the substrate, then the adhesive or any, excuse me, any patching or coatings or, really anything, and then the floor covering material itself. But then we also have the temperature and humidity inside the room. So really, it's all parts of that equation that are important.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I feel like one or multiple of those do get overlooked and that causes the issues. So.
Exactly. I encourage a flooring contractor to have a hygrometer. It's a pretty simple device. You can pick them up pretty much at any hardware store. It'll give you your temperature and humidity, and it'll give you both high and low. So you can come back and retrieve it and see what kind of fluctuations that went through.
Right.
And basically every home is going to have an internal environment. So as you go through temperature cycles and heating or air conditioning cycles, your temperatures are going to fluctuate, your humidities are going to fluctuate during that period, and you want to actually be able to get the floor covering into that realm. If you're installing a solid wood, you want to not only acclimate it for temperature, but you're going to want to use a pin meter on the wood until it hits equilibrium, because you don't want to have moisture going out or in to that wood until it's actually going to be until it's stabilized.
Yeah, good point. So we have a couple questions that I want to get to as well, because I feel like this is a big topic. So one question would be, can you acclimate flooring in a climate controlled warehouse and then deliver it to a job site? And is that going to work?
No, and we've actually had that question quite a few times here in tech services. We've had dealers that tell us, well, our warehouse is climate controlled, but the thing is it's not going to be to the exact same ranges as the building it's going into. Plus, it's going to go into a different environment while it's being transported to the job site.
Right.
So you want to acclimate it not just in that same building, but in the room that it's going to be going into, because like I said a minute ago, you can actually have varying degrees of temperature and humidity throughout a building.
Right. So does that mean then, like, is it okay once you get it to a job site, whether it's commercial or residential, are you going to want to acclimate all of those materials in one room, or do you need to spread them out into the different rooms? What's your recommendation there?
They should be spread out in the rooms they're actually going into.
Okay.
And the adhesive, we're going to try to acclimate to temperature. It's not quite as critical. The floor covering can be very sensitive to temperature fluctuations.
Okay. So I've heard different terms, I think even from you, of different ways that you can help ensure acclimation goes properly. Because if you get a pallet, of our adhesive, say, right?
Yeah.
And it's 48 4-gallon pails on a pallet, and you stick that pallet in a room and let it sit there, the ones on the inside might be super cold or super hot for a lot longer, right?
That's absolutely correct.
And same thing with flooring. So when it gets delivered, it's on a pallet, and if you don't break that pallet apart, and I've heard like log cabin or these different. So
yeah, you stack them like Lincoln logs essentially. Okay. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have an airspace between your boxes. So you'll set your boxes down in one direction, a little bit of an airspace between them. You'll run your next row the opposite direction again with an airspace. So that allows air to flow around those, and it will actually help that product acclimate. And if you, as you mentioned, if you brought a whole pallet in, they say they brought it in on a pallet jack or something like that, and they dropped it on the floor and just left it stay there. Wood and vinyl products are very insulating products. So what will happen is the internal temperature is not going to be off. And we've ran into situations where the first few boxes came off, they had no gapping, no problems like that. But then once they got into those internal boxes, we started to have gapping issues or peaked edges or something like that from compression. And since they didn't acclimate it properly, that was a problem.
Yeah.
So showing proper acclimation, understanding the way to acclimate it is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Yeah, if you think of like lasagna, right? You take a piece of frozen lasagna and you put it in the microwave. The outside is going to be boiling hot and the inside's still frozen,
Exactly.
And it's the same way. It's that thermal mass that's going to keep it. So the more mass that a product has, the longer it's going to take. And so things like adhesives, you can run into an issue if it's been stored cold and then put in there.
And with adhesives, you have a cold product, it's going to be difficult to work with. It's hard for the installer. So acclimating that adhesive at the same time can be a real advantage, especially when you get into moisture cured adhesives, because they're generally going to be 100% solids. There's no water in them. They're not going to freeze, but what will happen is those polymers will actually be affected, and they can be extremely stiff. We get calls all the time in the wintertime. This pad cement won't pour out, my adhesive won't pour, and then you find out they left it in their truck and it was 35 or 40 degrees the night before. Well, that adhesive got cold and that becomes a problem. And since you really should be acclimating your floor covering, if you acclimate your other adhesives and any other products are going to be used on site along at the same time, your life is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think another question that we have is, what about like VCT and even like LVT? Like, those products seem very stable, right? So what about those? Do we need to pay attention to those?
Yes, and it's really critical that you follow the flooring manufacturer's guidelines, because every flooring product is going to have different dimensional stability characteristics. Some products have got multiple layers of fiberglass and they're cross-plied and they're very dimensionally stable. Other products are not. Follow that flooring manufacturer's instructions. They will tell you what you need to do with their product, and please follow their instructions. That way you'll have a successful installation.
Perfect. And another question is, what if the builder is insisting that the floor needs to be put in before the HVAC is, which happens, right?
We've been running into that an awful lot, and they can actually have the HVAC system operational. They just generally don't want to pay for the electricity that's going to be involved with doing that. The problem with it is if you take that if you agree to do the installation, you're the professional. If you're the flooring professional, you're going to be the one responsible for the issues they're going to develop because of that.
Sure.
Now, if the flooring manufacturer says you don't have to acclimate it, then you're okay. But if the flooring manufacturer says that product needs to be acclimated, you need to follow their instructions.
Right. Well, I know even adhesive, right? Like we say, the language that we use, I believe, is, you have to acclimate it prior to installation, during installation, and permanently after, right?
Yep.
And so you get a lot of these homes where, maybe the floor gets installed and then it goes on the market. Are they keeping that acclimated for a month or two? It used to be homes were selling before you could put it online, but But as things are slowing and interest rates are climbing again, we're going to start seeing that probably being more and more of an issue now, because builders don't want to run heat and air for 2, 3, 4 months while they're showing homes to sell them. So,
And that's a good point. Actually, a friend of mine has a flooring store in South Florida, and they did an installation. This goes back a few years ago, where the flooring was acclimated. Everything was done correctly. The dealer did exactly everything the way it was supposed to be done. The the home closed, but the general contractor, the builder, decided he was going to shut the air off because he didn't want to pay for the air, the HVAC, while the building wasn't occupied. And it was a hardwood floor. The floor expanded, sheared, and failed. And this was a very expensive failure. It wasn't the flooring contractor's fault. It went back to the general contractor because ultimately it was his decision to shut the air off.
Right.
And there are things that can happen that are beyond anybody's control. You can have a power outage or something like
Sure.
that. And that's something that could cause a failure like that.
but having that best practice. So how would you recommend a flooring installer or flooring contractor? Is there a way to approach that correctly, like best practices or something? Does that need to be written down? Like, what's the right way to have that conversation with a builder?
Yeah, I would actually have the flooring contractor should put a checklist together as far as what they need to do, and they need to understand the flooring product that's going in. But it's actually critical that they document everything that they do. And that's why, like I mentioned earlier, having a hygrometer handy when you place your floor covering in there, so you can document when the flooring was delivered to site, where it was delivered and stored. I would take photographs of it. Everybody's got their digital camera on them, so they can actually take a photograph and document everything you've done. Unfortunately, with builders, we can't control what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I've been on job sites as an installer and as with the manufacturer, where we've gone out and they've got the product in there acclimating, but other trades have got all the doors open, and the building's really not under air because it's got all of this ambient moisture from outside coming in.
Yeah. So, I don't think residentially this would apply as much, but commercially, I think we just actually did a press release, and we usually don't do plugs on the show, but floor cloud, right?
Yeah.
So commercially, I think that is a solution that might be interesting for contractors to look into, to help with that documentation process, kind of from the time they start the install through the whole installation and even after. Is that a fair point? Is that something for people to check into?
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And documentation, it's just like if you're doing your moisture test. You document your moisture tests, otherwise you don't have proof that you've done them.
Right.
And whether you're doing I don't recommend using an impedance meter, but if that's what you're using, at least document it. I prefer either calcium chloride or relative humidity, but if you're going to do your moisture tests or acclimation, you want to mark where everything was done and just document as much as you possibly can on a site.
Right. Yeah, so, obviously acclimation is important. There's a lot of ways to get there, right?
Yes.
But you need to do it. You need to pay attention to what the flooring manufacturer says, what the adhesive or patch or leveling compound or whatever products you're doing, and think of it maybe like an Oreo, right? I'm on food today. I don't know why, lasagna, or maybe I'm just hungry. It's before lunch, but you've got the substrate, and then you've got anything that goes between, and then you've got the flooring material, right?
Yes.
So, what's the best part of an Oreo, right?
Yeah.
It's the filling.
It's the
That's
filling.
us, right?
Yeah, that's us.
That's the adhesive. But yeah, acclimation is a huge topic. It's super important. I think it's something that's being trained in all of the different training schools. So,
Yes.
when you look at CFI or Install, IUPAT, NWFA, I know they focus time and attention on the importance of acclimation. So,
Proper acclimation.
hopefully, as we get more and more certified trained installers in the industry, hopefully this issue will start to resolve itself. But in the meantime, Gary, any last words of advice or wisdom on acclimation?
Yeah, and to me, it's really up to the flooring contractor themselves, not just the installer, because most of the time those materials need to be delivered in advance so that they can acclimate to the service temperature. The flooring detailer, the retailer, the flooring contractor, they should know what's going on that site. And if the building is not ready for occupancy, if it doesn't have HVAC control, whether it's temporary or permanent, you cannot get that product acclimated properly, and you should not be installing most resilient flooring products.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, to your point earlier, Gary, sometimes maybe it's better to avoid one job that they refuse to do it right than to have to go back and spend the time, money, effort, energy, and suffer the reputation loss of having to deal with it, even if it wasn't your fault. So,
Yep. It's much more expensive to fix a job than it is to do it correctly.
yep. Pay attention, have those conversations ahead of time. Lincoln Logs, Oreos, lasagna, we're good to go,
We're
right?
good to go.
So, well, Gary, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. That's all the time we have for today. I do want to say thank you again to Margot Locust for joining us, and encourage you to check out her magazines, Premier Flooring Retailer and Fabulous Floors. If you haven't already, definitely go to our website, visit us there. You can see all the products that we have. I encourage you to connect with us on social media, engage with us there, subscribe to our newsletters, come back and watch every third Tuesday, 11:30 to noon Eastern Standard Time. Come back and watch Taylor Time Live. And just remember, at Taylor Adhesives, we're with you every step.